There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew about love shatters in a single instant. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Thursday afternoon in my kitchen in Baton Rouge. When my own son, the baby I rocked to sleep, the child I protected from every nightmare, raised his hand against me. The sound of my coffee cup breaking on the floor still echoes in my mind. But it was nothing compared to the crack I felt in my heart when I looked up from that cold floor and saw his wife smiling. Not shocked, not horrified, smiling. And then she said words that would haunt me forever. I thought it was too little. If it were up to me, you should have gotten more. In that moment, bleeding and broken on my own kitchen floor, I had to make an impossible choice. The kind of choice that no mother should ever have to make. But that would ultimately mean the difference between life and death. I didn't know then that my son wasn't acting of his own free will. I didn't know about the pills hidden in the trash, the manipulative text messages, or the calculated cruelty of someone who had turned his illness into a weapon. All I knew was that the phone number I'd been carrying in my pocket for days suddenly felt like the heaviest thing I'd ever held. And when I finally found the courage to dial those numbers, I set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything we had and, somehow, miraculously, save us both. This is the story of how I lost my son to save his life, and how one phone call changed our destiny forever. Please follow the channel, leave a like, and comment below telling me where you're watching from. Your support means everything. I remember the sound of the cup shattering before the slap even came. It was mid-afternoon in Baton Rouge, and the sunlight was streaming through my yellow kitchen curtains, painting the floor with a light that seemed to mock me. My son Ethan stood before me with bloodshot eyes, his breathing ragged, his chest heaving. And behind him, Melissa, his wife, stood with her arms crossed and a smile that froze my blood. It all started over a credit card. My credit card. "You don't trust me, Mom," he screamed, stepping closer. I tried to respond calmly, tried to explain that the limit was small, that it was just my Social Security money. But before the words could leave my mouth, the sound came sharp, cutting, merciless. The slap made me stagger, the kitchen spun, and when I lifted my face, I saw what destroyed me most. Melissa laughing. That wasn't enough. She said, "If it were up to me, you should have gotten more." I don't know what hurt more, the blow to my face or what came after. The silence? He just stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched, trembling. It was there, on that cold floor, with the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, that I realized my son was no longer mine. That something inside him had died, and maybe I had helped kill it without knowing. That night, alone, my face swollen, I stared at the phone on the table. There was a number written on an old piece of paper. Dr. Harris, emergency admission. My finger trembled over the keys. I just didn't know yet that, by making that call, I would save his life and destroy everything that remained of mine. But let me go back. Let me tell you how we got here. Because nothing happens without a reason. And this nightmare, this absolute nightmare, didn't begin that Thursday afternoon. It began years before, in a pediatrician's office in downtown Baton Rouge, when Ethan was just 7 years old and the doctors told me it was just a strong temperament. I can still see his little face, pale and scared, holding my hand so tight it hurt. He had just thrown a chair at his second-grade teacher, not because he was bad, not because he hated her, but because something inside him, something he couldn't control, had exploded like a firecracker. "Mrs. Bennett," the doctor said, his voice too calm, too clinical, "some children are just more intense than others." Intense. That was the word they used. As if my son were a flavor of coffee or a workout routine. But I knew, even then, I knew. A mother always knows when something is wrong with her child. It's like a splinter buried deep under the skin. You can't see it, but you feel it every single day. The episodes continued, the screaming, the broken doors, the holes punched in walls, and always, always, the terrible guilt that followed. He would cry in my arms, begging me to forgive him, saying he didn't mean it, that he didn't know what came over him. "I'm sorry, Mama, I'm so sorry," and I would hold him, stroke his hair, and lie to both of us. "It's okay, baby. It's going to be okay." But it wasn't okay. It never was. By the time Ethan turned 16, we finally had a name for the monster living inside him: Intermittent Explosive Disorder. The psychiatrist explained it like he was reading from a textbook: cold, detached, factual. He said it was a condition characterized by sudden episodes of unwarranted anger, aggression, and violence. He said it could be managed with medication and therapy. He didn't say it would steal my son from me piece by piece. The medication helped for a while. Ethan graduated high school. He got a job at a hardware store on Government Street. He seemed stable. And then he met Melissa. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. Long dark hair, bright eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office and had this way of talking that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. When Ethan introduced us at a Sunday barbecue, I wanted to love her. I wanted to believe she was the answer to my prayers, someone who could love my son despite his demons, someone who could be the calm to his storm. Mrs. Bennett, she said, shaking my hand with a grip that was just a little too firm. Ethan talks about you all the time. You raised an amazing man. I should have heard the performance in her voice. I should have noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes. But I was so desperate for my son to be happy that I ignored every red flag waving in my face. They got married on a humid September afternoon at a small chapel in Gonzales. I cried during the ceremony, tears I thought were joy, but now realize were something darker. Some primal maternal instinct warning me that I was losing him. And I was right. The first year of their marriage was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan called less. Visited even less. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say, "Yeah, Mom. Melissa just thinks we need to focus on building our own life together. You understand, right?" I understood. I understood that my son was slipping away, but I told myself it was natural. This was what happened when children grew up and started their own families. This was healthy separation. What a fool I was. It was about 18 months after the wedding when I noticed the change. Ethan's eyes had lost their light. He looked tired all the time, worn down, like life was pressing on him from all sides. And Melissa, she had transformed from the sweet, demure girl at the barbecue into something else entirely. She started making little comments, pointed remarks disguised as jokes. "Your mom's looking pretty old these days, isn't she?" she'd say with a laugh. "Does she always dress like that? I guess that generation just doesn't understand modern relationships." Ethan would chuckle uncomfortably, and I would pretend not to notice the venom dripping from her words. Then came the requests. Always for money. Always with some urgent excuse. "Mom, the car broke down. We need $1,500 for repairs." "Mom, Melissa's sister is sick. Can we borrow $2,000? "Mom, we're behind on rent. Just this once, please." I gave. Every single time, I gave. Because he was my son, and isn't that what mothers do? We give until there's nothing left. But it was never enough. The requests became demands. The gratitude became expectation. And somewhere along the way, I realized that Melissa wasn't just taking my money, she was taking my son. I found out later, much later, that she had been doing something far worse than I could have imagined. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That Thursday afternoon, the day everything shattered, started like any other. I had spent the morning tending to my small garden behind the house, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants and thinking about calling Ethan. We hadn't spoken in 2 weeks, which wasn't unusual anymore, but still felt wrong. Around 2 o'clock, I was inside making myself a cup of tea when I heard the car pull up. I looked out the window and saw Ethan's old Honda, the same one I'd helped him buy years ago, parked haphazardly in the driveway. My heart did that thing mother's hearts do. It leaped with hope and sank with dread all at once. He walked in without knocking. Melissa followed, her heels clicking on my hardwood floor like a countdown. "Hi, baby," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "What a nice surprise." "We need to talk, Mom." His voice was flat, dead. The teacup trembled in my hand. "Okay, we need your credit card." Melissa's voice cut through the air like a blade. "The one with the $15,000 limit." My mouth went dry. That card was for emergencies only. My entire safety net. The only thing standing between me and complete financial ruin in my retirement. I don't think that's a good idea," I said carefully. "That's my emergency fund. And you don't trust me, Ma?" Ethan's voice rose, and I saw that familiar flash in his eyes. The warning sign I'd learned to recognize too late. "Of course I trust you, sweetheart. It's just what?" He stepped closer. "Just that you think I'm some kind of screw-up. Some kind of failure." "No, baby. That's not." And that's when it happened. The cup fell from my hand. That's the sound I remember. The porcelain breaking into 1,000 pieces, and then his hand connected with my cheek. The world tilted. Pain exploded across my face. I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the corner of the counter, and fell. From the floor, I looked up at my son. My baby boy. The child I had rocked to sleep, whose tears I had dried, whose nightmares I had chased away. And he looked down at me like I was nothing. But worse, so much worse, was Melissa's reaction. She didn't gasp. She didn't rush to help me. She smiled. Actually smiled. "That wasn't enough," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. If it were up to me, you should have gotten more. Ethan didn't say anything. He just stood there, his chest heaving, his fists still clenched, staring at me like he couldn't quite believe what he'd done, but also couldn't quite bring himself to care. They left. Just walked out. No apology. No backward glance. I stayed on that floor for I don't know how long. The afternoon light moved across the broken cup, across the drops of blood from where I'd bitten my lip, across my trembling hands. When I finally pulled myself up, my reflection in the window showed a stranger, an old woman with a swollen face and empty eyes, wondering how her life had come to this. That night, I sat in the dark at my kitchen table. My face throbbed, my heart hurt worse. And on that table, under a stack of old bills, was the piece of paper Mr. Coleman had given me weeks ago. Mr. Coleman was my neighbor, a retired postal worker who had heard more than one of Ethan's episodes over the years. He had pulled me aside one day and pressed that paper into my hand. "If it ever gets too bad," he'd said, his kind eyes full of worry, "call this number. My nephew works there. It's a psychiatric hospital. They have an emergency admission line." I had thanked him and tucked it away, never imagining I would actually need it. But now, in the darkness, with my son's handprint still burning on my cheek and Melissa's words echoing in my ears, I pulled out that paper. Dr. Harris Emergency Psychiatric Admission. My hand shook as I reached for the phone. I picked it up, put it down, picked it up again. How do you make a call that might save your child's life but will definitely destroy whatever relationship you have left? How do you choose between being a good mother and being a mother who does good? I didn't know then that by morning, I would make that call. I didn't know that within 48 hours, everything would explode in ways I couldn't have imagined. I didn't know that I would discover the truth about Melissa's cruelty, a truth so dark it would make that slap seem almost merciful. All I knew, sitting in that dark kitchen with a phone in one hand and a future I couldn't see in the other, was that something had to change. Because the next time, and I knew there would be a next time, one of us might not survive it. And I had to decide, would I be the mother who looked away or the mother who made the hardest call of her life? I still see Ethan's face as a little boy holding my hand in that hospital corridor. He was 7 years old, small for his age, with those big green eyes that looked up at me like I was the only thing standing between him and the monsters in his head. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that sickly hospital white that makes everyone look half dead. We were sitting on those uncomfortable plastic chairs outside the psychiatrist's office, waiting for our name to be called. Ethan's legs dangled, not quite reaching the floor, and he kept kicking them back and forth, a nervous rhythm that matched my own racing heartbeat. "Am I crazy, Mama?" he had asked, his voice so small I barely heard it over the humming lights. I pulled him close, breathing in the smell of his strawberry shampoo, trying to keep my own tears from falling. "No, baby, you're not crazy. Your brain just works a little differently, that's all. Like how some people need glasses to see better. You might need some help to feel better." He nodded against my chest, but I could feel him trembling. That was the first time we heard the words that would define our lives. Intermittent Explosive Disorder. Dr. Pattersina, kind woman with silver hair and reading glasses on, a chain, explained it to me while Ethan played with toys in the corner of her office. "It's neurological. Mrs. Bennett," she said gently, "it's not about bad parenting or lack of discipline. His brain processes frustration and anger differently than most people. The episodes aren't his fault, but they are his reality." She prescribed medication, cognitive behavioral therapy, anger management techniques, a whole arsenal of tools to help my little boy survive in a world that wasn't built for brains like his. And for a while, for blessed, precious years, it worked. Oh, we had our moments. The teenage years were rough, as they are for any parent. But add in a disorder that turns minor frustrations into volcanic eruptions, and you've got yourself a special kind of hell. There were holes in walls from punched fists, doors ripped off hinges, a shattered windshield after he failed his driving test the first time. But there were good times too. Times when the medication balanced just right, when the therapy sessions clicked, when Ethan would come to me with tears in his eyes and say, "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know why I'm like this, but I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." And I believed him, because I could see him fighting every single day against something inside him that most people can't even imagine, a rage so sudden and overwhelming that it hijacks your entire body before your rational mind even knows what's happening. By the time he turned 18, we had found a rhythm, a routine. He took his pills every morning and every night, small orange tablets that I watched him swallow with water, making sure he didn't palm them or spit them out. He saw his therapist every Tuesday afternoon. He practiced the breathing exercises, the grounding techniques, the cognitive restructuring that gave him precious seconds between stimulus and explosion. He was managing, we were managing. And then came Melissa. I remember the first time he brought her home for dinner. It was a Sunday in May, jasmine blooming in the yard, the smell of my pot roast filling the house. She walked in wearing a sundress the color of forget-me-nots, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she shook my hand with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Mrs. Bennett, Ethan has told me so much about you. Your home is lovely." She asked all the right questions, complimented the food, laughed at my stories, helped with the dishes afterward. When they left that evening, Ethan kissed my cheek and whispered, "I think she might be the one, Mom." My heart soared. After everything we'd been through, maybe my son had found someone who could love him, all of him, including the broken parts. What a blind fool I was. The engagement happened fast. 6 months of dating, and suddenly there was a ringer modest diamond that I later learned was mostly paid for with money borrowed from his savings. The wedding followed 4 months later, a simple ceremony that I helped pay for because they wanted to start their marriage debt-free. I should have seen it then. The way Melissa's eyes would calculate whenever money was mentioned, the way she subtly positioned herself between Ethan and me during family photos, the way she would touch his arm and whisper things that made his expression darken. But I was so grateful that someone loved my complicated son that I ignored every warning bell clanging in my maternal gut. The first year of marriage seemed fine on the surface. They moved into a small apartment in mid-city, about 20 minutes from my house. Ethan kept his job at the hardware store. Melissa continued working at the dental office. They came over for Sunday dinners once a month, and everything seemed normal. But then I started noticing things. Ethan looked tired all the time. Not just physically tired, but exhausted in his soul, like something was draining him from the inside out. The light had gone out of his eyes. When I asked if he was okay, he'd smile, that fake smile people use when they're drowning and don't want anyone to notice. "I'm fine, Mom. Just adjusting to married life." You know, I didn't know. I'd been married once, to Ethan's father, before cancer took him when Ethan was 12. But even in our hardest times, even when money was tight and stress was high, I never saw that look in my husband's eyes, the look of someone who had given up on joy. And Melissa changed too. The sweet, accommodating girl from those first dinners disappeared, replaced by someone with sharp edges and sharper words. She started making comments, little digs disguised as jokes. Ethan's mother still does his laundry. She'd tell her friends with a laugh. Even though I'd only offered to help once when their washer broke. She calls him every day. Can you imagine? Like he's still 5 years old. I guess some mothers just can't let go. Ethan would laugh uncomfortably, caught between defending me and keeping peace with his wife. I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw would clench, and I recognized the signs. The pressure was building. Then came the week that changed everything, though I didn't understand the significance until much later. It was a Tuesday afternoon, trash day in my neighborhood. I had taken out my garbage and was wheeling the bin back when something in Ethan's trash bag sitting on the curb from there. Visit the day before caught my eye, orange, bright orange against the black plastic. My heart stopped. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. It was an invasion of privacy, a violation of boundaries. But some deep maternal instinct made me reach into that bag and pull out what I saw. Pills, dozens of them. His antipsychotic medication, the mood stabilizers that kept his disorder in check, all broken in half and thrown away like garbage. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped them. I stood there on the sidewalk, in broad daylight, staring at those broken pills and understanding that my son hadn't been taking his medication. For how long? Weeks? Months? Without those pills, his brain was a ticking time bomb. Without the chemical balance they provided, every frustration became a spark. Every disappointment, gasoline, every minor setback, a lit match. I should have called him right then. Should have confronted him, demanded to know what was happening. But fear froze me. Fear that he would deny it. Fear that I would push him away completely. Fear that Melissa had somehow convinced him he didn't need the medication. That he could overcome it naturally, or some other dangerous nonsense. So I kept the pills, hid them in my kitchen drawer like evidence of a crime, and waited. 3 days later, Ethan exploded. Not at me, not yet, but I heard about it from his boss, Mr. Raymond, who called me because I was still listed as his emergency contact. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Ethan destroyed the break room today. Put his fist through the vending machine, through a chair, scared the hell out of everyone. I had to let him go. I'm sorry." I know he's got challenges, but I can't risk the safety of my other employees. My blood ran cold. Did he take his medication this morning? A pause. Ma'am, I don't know. But he mentioned something about Melissa saying doctors just want to drug people, that he was strong enough without them. There it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. Melissa wasn't just neglecting to remind him to take his pills. She was actively convincing him to stop. She was weaponizing his disorder, turning it into a tool for her own purposes that I couldn't yet understand but could feel in my bones were sinister. I called Ethan that night. He didn't answer. I called again and again. Finally, Melissa picked up. He doesn't want to talk to you. Helen, she said, my first name like acid on her tongue. You need to give him space. Let him be a man instead of treating him like a sick child. Melissa, listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He needs his medication. Please, you have to understand. She laughed. Actually laughed. You mean those pills that turn him into a zombie? That make him weak and dependent? No thanks. He's better off without them. Better off without a lot of things. Actually, the line went dead. That night, I stared at those broken pills in my drawer and understood with terrible clarity what was coming. Like watching storm clouds gather on the horizon, knowing the lightning would strike but not knowing where or when. I just didn't know that when it finally hit, it would be my own face in the path of the bolt. The morning after Ethan hit me, I woke up to a face I didn't recognize. The woman staring back from my bathroom mirror had a purple bruise blooming across her left cheek like some poisonous flower. Her lips split and swollen, her eyes hollowed out by a sleepless night spent replaying that moment over and over. I touched the bruise gently, wincing at the tenderness, and felt something inside me crack open, not my skin, but something deeper. My dignity, maybe. Or the last fragile thread of hope that this could still be fixed with love alone. I spent that morning moving through my house like a ghost. Making coffee I didn't drink. Staring at the broken cup pieces I'd swept into a dustpan but couldn't bring myself to throw away. They sat on my counter, jagged and sharp, a perfect metaphor for everything that had shattered. Around 10 o'clock, I heard the knock, 3 soft taps, gentler than a neighbor usually knocks. Like whoever was there didn't want to startle me. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't ready to explain the bruise, to face the questions, to admit out loud what my son had become. But the knocking came again, followed by a familiar voice. Donna, Helen. It's Walter Coleman. I brought you some of Martha's banana bread. Mr. Coleman, my neighbor for 15 years. Ever since he and his late wife Martha had moved into the house next door. He was a retired postal worker with kind eyes and hands weathered from decades of sorting mail in Louisiana heat. After Martha passed 2 years ago from a stroke, he'd taken to gardening and baking, saying it kept her memory alive. I opened the door just a crack, angling my face away from the morning light, but Mr. Coleman had seen too much in his 3 years to be fooled. His expression shifted from friendly to horrified in the space of a heartbeat. Dear God, Helen, he breathed. He did this to you. It wasn't a question. He'd heard everything yesterday, the shouting, the crash, the terrible silence that followed. Our houses were close enough that sound carried, especially through open windows on a humid Louisiana afternoon. I tried to smile, wincing at how even that small movement hurt. I'm fine, Walter. It was just, don't, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Don't make excuses for him. I heard it all. And this, he gestured at my face, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. This isn't going to end well, Helen. You know that, don't you? My throat tightened. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump of grief and shame lodged there. May I come in? He asked gently. I stepped back, letting him into my kitchen, the scene of yesterday's crime. He set the banana bread on the counter, carefully avoiding the dustpan of broken cup pieces, and then turned to face me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I need to show you something, he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket. I should have given this to you months ago, but I kept hoping I was wrong. That things would get better. But after yesterday, double quotes, he unfolded the paper and handed it to me. It was worn at the creases, like it had been folded and unfolded many times. On it was written a phone number in neat, careful handwriting, and underneath, Dr. James Heresy, Emergency Psychiatric Admission, St. Mary's Hospital. My heart began to pound. Walter, what is this? He sighed, running a hand through his white hair. About 6 months ago, maybe 7, I was working in my front yard when a man pulled up in front of your house. Nice car, professional-looking fellow with a medical bag. He knocked on your door, but you weren't home. When he turned around, I called out, asked if I could help. Mr. Coleman moved to my kitchen window, looking out at his own house as he continued. He introduced himself as Dr. Harris, said he was Ethan's psychiatrist. He looked worried. Helen, really worried. He said he'd been trying to reach Ethan for weeks because he'd missed his last 3 appointments and hadn't refilled his prescriptions. He asked if I knew how to contact him. I felt my legs go weak and sank into a kitchen chair. What did you tell him? I gave him Ethan's phone number, the one you'd given me in case of emergency. But before he left, he handed me this number and said something I'll never forget. Mr. Coleman turned back to face me, his expression grave. He said, if things get bad, and I mean really bad, someone needs to call this emergency line. But it has to be family. It has to be someone who can authorize involuntary admission if necessary. Tell Mrs. Bennett I said that only she can make this call when the time comes. The paper trembled in my hands. Involuntary admission. That means if Ethan becomes a danger to himself or others, you have the legal authority as his mother to have him admitted to the psychiatric ward, even if he doesn't want to go. Mr. Coleman's voice was gentle but firm. The doctor knew something like yesterday might happen. He was trying to prepare you. I stared at the number, feeling the weight of it like a stone in my chest. To call that number would mean betraying my son, admitting to the world that I couldn't save him on my own. That love wasn't enough. It would mean watching him be taken away in restraints, possibly hating me for the rest of his life. But not calling it might mean something worse. There's more, Mr. Coleman said quietly, reaching into his pocket again. This time he pulled out another piece of paper. Newer, crisper. I didn't want to show you this, but you need to know what you're dealing with. He handed it to me, and I unfolded it with shaking fingers. It was a printout of a text message conversation. The names at the top made my blood run cold. Melissa and someone named Derek. My eyes scanned the messages. And with each line, my world tilted further off its axis. Melissa, it's working. He's completely off the meds now. Thinks he doesn't need them. Derek, you sure about this? Sounds dangerous. Melissa, that's the point. The worse he gets, the more dependent on me he becomes. And when his mother finally gives up on him, and we'll have complete control. Plus his disability payments once we get him declared incompetent. Derek, you're cold. Mel, remind me never to get on your bad side. Melissa, just remember our deal. When this is all over, we split everything. The paper slipped from my fingers and floated to the floor like a poisoned leaf. Where did you get this? I whispered. Mr. Coleman's jaw tightened. My nephew James works in IT. He's been dating Melissa's coworker for a few months, girl named Sandra from the dental office. Last week, Sandra came to him upset because she'd seen something on the office computer. Melissa had been using the work computers to text this Derek person, probably thinking it was safer than using her own phone. Sandra took screenshots and showed James. When he saw Ethan's name, he brought them to me. I felt like I was falling, like the floor had opened up beneath me and I was plummeting into some dark pit where mothers lose their children to the cruelty of strangers wearing wedding rings. She's been deliberately keeping him off his medication, I said, my voice hollow. She's been sabotaging him, making him worse. So she can what? Take his money, control him, and isolate him, Mr. Coleman added grimly. Notice how he barely talks to you anymore. How she's always there, always between you two. She's been systematically cutting him off from everyone who might notice what she's doing. You're the last obstacle, Helen, and yesterday, I think she pushed him to remove you from the equation. The bruise on my face suddenly felt like it was burning. Yesterday wasn't just an explosion of uncontrolled rage. It was orchestrated. Melissa had wound Ethan up like a weapon and pointed him at me. I picked up Dr. Harris's number again, staring at it through tears that finally spilled over. I don't know if I can make this call, I admitted. He's my son, Walter, my baby boy. Mr. Coleman knelt beside my chair, his old knees cracking, and took my hand in both of his. Helen, listen to me. That boy who hit you yesterday, that wasn't your son. That was a sick man being manipulated by an evil woman. Your real son, the one who used to help Martha in her garden, who cried at his father's funeral, who fought so hard for so many years to be better, he's still in there. But if you don't make this call, you're going to lose him forever. Either he'll hurt someone badly enough to go to prison, or he'll hurt himself, or Melissa will destroy him completely. But what if he hates me? I sobbed. What if this is the thing that finally breaks us? What if it's the thing that saves him? Mr. Coleman countered. What if, years from now, he thanks you for loving him enough to do the hardest thing a mother can do? I looked at the number, then at the text messages on the floor, then at my reflection in the kitchen window, an old woman with a broken face and a choice that would define the rest of her life. I folded Dr. Harris's number carefully and put it in my pocket. I need time to think. Mr. Coleman nodded and stood slowly. Don't take too long, Helen. Because if yesterday was bad, I'm afraid of what tomorrow might bring. He left the banana bread and took the text message printout with him, saying he'd keep it safe in case I needed proof later. After he was gone, I sat alone in my kitchen, my hand in my pocket, fingers wrapped around that piece of paper like a talisman. I didn't know that I only had 3 days before I'd need to use it. 3 days before everything would explode in ways that would make yesterday's violence look like a warning shot. 3 days before I'd discovered just how far Melissa was willing to go and how little of my son would be left when she was done with him. It was a Thursday evening when my world finally collapsed completely. 3 days had passed since Mr. Coleman gave me that number. 3 days of jumping at every sound, of sleeping with my phone on the nightstand, of touching the piece of paper in my pocket like a rosary bead. I had just finished microwaving a sad little dinner leftover chicken and rice that tasted like cardboard when I heard the car, not the normal sound of a car pulling into a driveway, but the violent screech of tires on asphalt. The grinding of gears shifted too hard, the slam of a door that shook my windows. My blood turned to ice water. I knew that energy. Every mother who's lived with a child like Ethan learns to read the electrical charge in the air before a storm hits. And this was a hurricane bearing down on my little house in Baton Rouge. The footsteps on my porch weren't normal footsteps. They were heavy, erratic, the rhythm of someone whose body was being controlled by something primal and furious. Then came the pounding on my door. Not pounding, hammering. Fists hitting wood with enough force that I heard the frame crack. Mom, open this door right now. Ethan's voice, but not Ethan's voice. It was distorted by rage, thick and slurred like he'd been drinking. Though I knew he hadn't. This was pure, unfiltered neurological chaos. My hands shook as I stood frozen in my kitchen. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to call for help. But he was my son, my baby. And somewhere in that rational part of my brain that mothers never quite turn off, I thought maybe I could talk him down. Maybe I could reach him. I unlocked the door. It exploded inward so violently that I stumbled backward, barely avoiding being hit. And there he was, my Ethan, but transformed into something I didn't recognize. His eyes were wild, pupils dilated so wide they looked black. His face was flushed red, veins standing out on his neck and temples. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white. And behind him, like a shadow, like a demon whispering in his ear, stood Melissa. Her face was composed, almost serene, but her eyes, God, her eyes were gleaming with something that looked horribly like satisfaction. You did this. Ethan screamed, advancing into my house. You called them. You tried to have me locked up. My heart stopped. What? Ethan, I didn't. Don't lie to me. His voice cracked the air like a whip. He grabbed a picture frame from my entry table, the one of him at his high school graduation. Smiling, healthy, hopeful, and hurled it across the room. It exploded against the wall, glass raining down like deadly snow. Baby, please. I don't know what you're talking about. The hospital called me. He roared, his face now inches from mine. I could smell his breath, hot and sour, could see the veins in his eyes, could feel the heat radiating off him like fever. They said someone contacted them about emergency admission. They said my mother was concerned I was a danger. My mind raced. I hadn't called. I'd kept that number in my pocket, carried it like a burden I couldn't bring myself to put down or pick up. So who? I looked past Ethan to Melissa, and in that instant, I understood. She'd called pretending to be me. She'd set this up, lit this fuse, and now she was standing back to watch the explosion. Melissa, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? She smiled, actually smiled. I did what needed to be done, Helen. I called to inquire about admission procedures. I thought you'd want to know your options. The lie was so smooth, so perfectly crafted. She'd made the call knowing it would get back to Ethan, knowing exactly how he'd react, knowing he'd come here with murder in his eyes. You see, Melissa said to Ethan, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I told you she was trying to get rid of you. She thinks you're crazy. She wants you locked up like an animal. No. I reached for Ethan, but he knocked my hand away so hard I felt something pop in my wrist. Ethan, listen to me. I didn't call anyone. I would never, but he was beyond listening. The part of his brain that processed reason, that evaluated evidence, that distinguished truth from manipulation, it was offline, drowned in a chemical storm that no amount of love could penetrate. He moved through my house like a tornado. The mirror in my hallway, the antique one my grandmother had given me, shattered under his fist. Blood sprayed from his knuckles, but he didn't seem to feel it. He swept everything off my kitchen counter. The mail, the fruit bowl, the cookie jar shaped like a rooster that had survived 30 years in my kitchen. All of it crashed to the floor in a symphony of destruction. "Ethan, your hand, you're bleeding," I cried, trying to reach him, trying to stop this nightmare. He looked at his bleeding hand like it belonged to someone else, then grabbed the kitchen chair, the one where I'd sat just this morning drinking coffee and praying for guidance, and threw it across the room. It hit my china cabinet, and I watched helplessly as my mother's dishes, the ones I'd inherited when she passed, tumbled out and smashed on the hardwood floor. Each breaking piece felt like a piece of my heart. "Why won't you just leave me alone?" he screamed. And there were tears now, mixing with the sweat on his face. "Why can't you just let me be? Because I love you," I sobbed. "Because you're my son and I'm watching you destroy yourself." "I'm not destroying myself. I'm finally free." He swept his arm across my bookshelf, sending books flying. "Free from your worry, free from your hovering, free from those goddamn pills that made me feel like a zombie." There it was. Melissa's poison, spoken in his voice. I backed toward the hallway, toward my bathroom, the only room with a lock. Melissa stood in the doorway still, her arms crossed, watching the show she'd orchestrated. And in her eyes, I saw the truth. She wanted him to hurt me. She wanted him to go so far that there would be no coming back, that he'd be arrested or institutionalized, and she'd have complete control of whatever pieces remained. Ethan grabbed a framed photo of his father, my late husband, the man who'd died when Ethan was just 12, and held it up. "Even Dad couldn't stand living with you. That's why he left." The words cut deeper than any physical blow could. "Ethan, your father died of cancer. You know that. You were there. He gave up. He gave up because living with your constant anxiety and worry was killing him anyway." He raised the frame above his head and I saw what he was about to do: smash it. Destroy the last image we had of the man who'd loved us both. No. I lunged forward, and for a moment, just a moment, our eyes met, and I saw him. The real him. Buried deep beneath the rage and the chemical imbalance and Melissa's manipulation. I saw my son. I saw the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them roses. I saw the teenager who'd cried in my arms after his first episode, terrified of the monster living in his own head. I saw the young man who'd fought so hard for so many years to be better, and then it was gone. The rage flooded back like a tide, and he threw the frame. Not at the wall, at me. I ducked, and it sailed past my head, exploding against the bathroom door behind me. Glass rained down, and I felt a sharp sting as a piece caught my shoulder. That's when I ran. I scrambled into the bathroom and threw my body against the door, fumbling for the lock with shaking hands. It clicked just as Ethan's weight hit the other side, rattling the entire frame. "Mom, open this door, open it." He pounded and pounded, and I slid down to sit on the cold tile floor, my back against the door, feeling every impact shudder through my spine. Outside, I could hear Melissa's voice, sweet and concerned. "Baby, calm down. Come on, let's go. You've made your point. I'm not done," he screamed. The pounding continued. Then a crash. He was kicking now. The door frame was splintering. It wouldn't hold much longer. And then, cutting through the chaos, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A sob, raw and broken and utterly defeated. "Mom?" Ethan's voice came through the door, suddenly small, suddenly young. "Mom, I just wanted you to trust me. I just wanted you to believe in me." My own sobs matched his. "I do, baby. I do believe in you. I always have." "Then why does everyone keep trying to lock me up?" His voice cracked. "Why does everyone think I'm broken?" "Because you are," I thought but didn't say. "Because something in your beautiful brain is broken, and it's not your fault, but it's destroying you anyway. Because I love you too much to watch you die, even if saving you means you'll hate me forever." The pounding stopped. The house went silent except for our synchronized crying, separated by a thin bathroom door that felt like the distance between Earth and stars. Then I heard Melissa, "Come on, Ethan, let's go. She's not worth it." Footsteps. The front door opening, the sound of their car starting. I stayed on that bathroom floor for another 10 minutes, maybe 20, until I was absolutely sure they were gone. When I finally emerged, my house looked like a crime scene. Blood on the walls from Ethan's hand. Glass everywhere. Furniture overturned, books scattered like fallen soldiers. And in the middle of it all, on my destroyed kitchen table, my phone sat untouched. Next to it, that piece of paper, Dr. Harris's number. My hands were still shaking, would probably shake for hours. I picked up the phone. The paper was creased and worn from 3 days in my pocket, but the numbers were still clear. I thought about Ethan sobbing on the other side of that door. I thought about Melissa's satisfied smile. I thought about those text messages Mr. Coleman had shown me, about the medication hidden in the trash, about everything that had led to this moment. And I thought about what would happen the next time, because there would be a next time, and it would be worse. My finger hovered over the first number, and then, with tears streaming down my face and my heart breaking into pieces as small as my mother's shattered dishes, I started to dial. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. Each ring felt like an eternity, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff with my son's future and maybe his life balanced in my trembling hands. St. Mary's Hospital, Psychiatric Emergency Line. This is Nurse Patterson speaking. The voice was calm, professional, exactly what you'd expect from someone who fields calls from desperate people in the middle of their worst nightmares. But there was warmth there too, a gentle quality that made my throat tighten with relief and grief all at once. I need ... double quotes, the words stuck. How do you say it? How do you form the sentence that will change everything? My son, he needs help. Okay, ma'am, I'm here to help you. Can you tell me your name? Helen Bennett. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, thin and hollow like it was coming from somewhere far away. Helen, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer as clearly as you can. Is your son in immediate danger of hurting himself or someone else? I looked around my destroyed living room. Blood on the walls. Shattered glass catching the lamplight like scattered diamonds. The broken frame with my husband's photo, the glass spider-webbed but his face still visible, frozen in time before cancer took him, before Ethan's disorder took over, before everything fell apart. He destroyed my house. He's bleeding. He cut his own hand punching through a mirror and didn't even seem to notice. The words tumbled out faster now, and his wife Melissa, she's been keeping him off his medication. Deliberately, I found pills in the trash. And there are text messages, and she called you pretending to be me and Helen. Nurse Patterson's voice cut through my spiraling panic like a lifeline. Take a breath for me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Good. Now, is your son still at your location? No. He left maybe 15 minutes ago, 20, with his wife. Do you know where they went? Their apartment, I think in Mid-City. 2847 Napoleon Avenue apartment, 3B. I heard typing on the other end. And your son's full name? Ethan Michael Bennett. He's 32 years old. He has intermittent explosive disorder. He's been diagnosed since he was 7. My voice cracked. He's not a bad person. He's sick. And someone has been making him sicker on purpose. I understand. Helen, I need to transfer you to Dr. Harris. He's the attending psychiatrist on call tonight. He'll be able to authorize emergency admission. Can you hold for just a moment? Yes, I'll hold. The line clicked to a soft jazz melody that felt obscenely cheerful given the circumstances. I sank into my kitchen chair, one of the only pieces of furniture still standing, and stared at the blood drops on my floor. Ethan's blood. My baby's blood. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I about to make the biggest mistake of my life? The music cut off. Mrs. Bennett. The voice was male, deep and reassuring. This is Dr. James Harris. Nurse Patterson briefed me on the situation. I want you to know that I remember Ethan very well. He was my patient until about 8 months ago when he stopped coming to appointments. Relief washed over me. You know him. You know he's not. He's not evil or violent by nature. He has a neurological condition that, when unmanaged, can result in dangerous explosive episodes. Dr. Harris finished gently. Mrs. Bennett, I tried to reach him multiple times. I was very concerned when he stopped refilling his prescriptions. His medication regimen was carefully balanced. Going off it suddenly is extremely dangerous. His wife convinced him he didn't need it. I said, and then I told him everything. The text messages Mr. Coleman's nephew had found. The pills in the trash, the escalating violence, tonight's episode, the blood, the destruction, the sobbing on the other side of the bathroom door. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mrs. Bennett, Dr. Harris finally said, his voice grave, what you're describing is medical abuse. This woman has been deliberately sabotaging your son's treatment, likely for financial or psychological control. And without his medication, Ethan is quite literally not in his right mind. The person who destroyed your home tonight wasn't your son, it was his unmanaged disorder, weaponized by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Hearing it said so plainly, so professionally, made something inside me break open. I started crying, really crying. The kind of sobs that come from somewhere deep in your chest where you store all the pain you've been too strong to release. I don't want to betray him, I choked out. I don't want him to hate me, but I'm so scared. I'm scared he's going to hurt someone. I'm scared he's going to hurt himself. I'm scared that next time I won't be fast enough to lock the door. Helen, may I call you Helen? Yes. Helen, what you're doing right now isn't betrayal. It's the most profound act of love a mother can give. You're choosing his life over his temporary feelings. You're choosing his future over your fear of his anger. That takes extraordinary courage. It doesn't feel like courage, I whispered. It feels like I'm destroying what's left of us. I know, but I need you to trust me on this. If we don't intervene now, there may not be anything left to destroy. Ethan is in crisis. Without immediate psychiatric care and medication, his episodes will continue to escalate. Eventually, he'll either seriously injure someone, possibly you, possibly his wife, possibly a stranger, or he'll harm himself in an episode of guilt and despair. I've seen it happen too many times. My hand tightened on the phone. What happens if I authorize admission? We'll send a mobile crisis team to his apartment. They're trained professionals who specialize in psychiatric emergencies. They'll assess his condition and, if necessary, transport him here for evaluation and stabilization. He'll be placed on a 72-hour psychiatric hold while we reestablish his medication regimen and assess the full extent of what's happened. After that, depending on his progress, we'll develop a longer-term treatment plan, and if he refuses to go, that's why I need your authorization. Helen, as his next of kin. And given the danger he poses to himself and others, you can authorize involuntary admission. It's not an easy decision, but it's a legal and necessary one. I closed my eyes. Saw Ethan as a little boy, curled up in my lap after a nightmare. Saw him as a teenager, apologizing through tears after punching a hole in his bedroom wall. Saw him as a young man on his wedding day, hope shining in his eyes as he looked at Melissa, believing she would save him when all along she was planning to destroy him. Helen, are you still there? I'm here. I opened my eyes. I authorize it, please. Please help my son. You're doing the right thing. I'm going to dispatch our mobile crisis team now. I need you to give me his exact address again and any information about the layout of the apartment. How many exits, whether he has access to weapons. I told him everything I knew. The second-floor apartment with a front door and a back balcony exit. No guns. Ethan had always been afraid of them, but plenty of kitchen knives. And in his current state, anything could become a weapon. Understood. The team will arrive within 30 minutes. Helen, I need you to do something for me. Are you injured? I touched my shoulder where the glass had cut me. Just a scratch. I want you to tend to that wound, and then I want you to stay by your phone. Don't try to contact Ethan or Melissa. Let the professionals handle this. If anything changes, if you hear from him. If he shows up at your house again, you call 911 immediately. Do you understand? Yes. Good. And Helen, when this is over, when Ethan is stable and can think clearly again, he's going to understand what you did for him tonight. It may take time, but he'll understand. What if he doesn't? The question came out as barely a whisper. Then you'll know you loved him enough to save his life anyway. And sometimes, that has to be enough. After we hung up, I sat in my destroyed kitchen and waited. The silence was deafening. Every car that passed made me jump, thinking it was Ethan coming back. Every creak of my old house settling made my heart race. At some point, I walked to my bedroom and found my first aid kit. I cleaned that on my shoulder, applied antibiotic ointment, covered it with a bandage. My hands moved automatically like they belonged to someone else. Then I went to Ethan's old room, the one I'd kept exactly as he'd left it when he moved out, unable to bear changing it, unable to accept that my little boy was really gone. I sat on his childhood bed, surrounded by his high school trophies and posters of bands he'd loved and books he'd read, and I let myself fall apart completely. I cried for the little boy who'd held my hand in that hospital corridor. I cried for the teenager who'd fought so hard against the monster in his brain. I cried for the young man who'd believed love could cure him and found only manipulation instead. And I cried for myself, for the mother who had to choose between being loved and keeping her child alive. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Crisis team en route to location. We'll update you shortly. Dr. Harris, I clutched the phone to my chest and whispered a prayer to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Please let me be doing the right thing. Please let him forgive me. Please let him live. The minutes ticked by like hours. And somewhere across town, in an apartment I'd visited only twice because Melissa never made us feel welcome, my son was about to have his life turned upside down. Because of me. Because I'd made the call. Because I'd chosen his survival over his freedom. And God help me, I'd do it again. 2 days after they took Ethan away, I finally worked up the courage to go to St. Mary's Hospital. 2 days of silence, 2 days of staring at my phone, waiting for updates that came in clinical, impersonal text messages from Dr. Harris. Patient stable, medication reintroduced. No visitors yet, no visitors yet. Those 3 words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The crisis team had taken him Thursday night. It was now Saturday morning, and the guilt was eating me alive. I hadn't slept more than an hour or 2 each night, jerking awake from nightmares where Ethan was screaming my name, where he was being restrained, where he looked at me with eyes full of hatred and betrayal. Mr. Coleman had helped me clean up my house Friday morning. He didn't say much, just swept glass and righted furniture and made me cups of tea I didn't drink. Before he left, he squeezed my shoulder and said, "You did what needed to be done. Helen, don't you forget that." But sitting alone in my repaired house felt wrong. Like I was trying to put a broken vase back together and pretend it had never shattered in the first place. So Saturday morning, I drove to St. Mary's. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask permission. I just needed to be close to him, even if I couldn't see him, even if he never wanted to see me again. The hospital was a sprawling brick building on Essen Lane, with a separate psychiatric wing connected by a covered walkway. I'd been here once before, years ago. When Ethan was 17 and had an episode so severe we'd brought him to the emergency room, they'd stabilized him and sent him home with adjusted medication. But this was different. This time, he wasn't leaving after a few hours. This time, he was locked in a ward, and I was the one who'd put him there. I parked in the visitor lot and just sat in my car for a long time, watching people come and go, families visiting loved ones, nurses changing shifts, a priest walking toward the main entrance with his Bible tucked under his arm. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Permission? Forgiveness? A sign from God that I hadn't just destroyed my relationship with my only child. Finally, I got out of the car. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. I made it halfway across the parking lot before I had to stop and lean against a light post. My breath coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the weight of what I'd done. That's when I heard the voice, "Are you okay?" I looked up to see a woman standing a few feet away. She was probably in her mid-60s with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun and worried eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore scrubs light blue with little butterflies on them and a hospital ID badge clipped to her collar. "I'm fine," I lied, straightening up, just catching my breath. She studied me for a moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Recognition, sympathy. I couldn't tell. "You're Helen Bennett," she said. Not a question, a statement. My heart stopped. "How do you? I'm Karen Whitmore, head nurse in the psychiatric wing." She paused, and her expression shifted into something that looked like pain. "And I'm also Melissa Whitmore's mother." The world tilted. I grabbed the light post again, my knuckles white. Melissa's mother. Standing here in front of me, the mother of the woman who had systematically destroyed my son, I couldn't form words. My mind was racing, trying to understand why she was approaching me, what she wanted, whether she was here to defend her daughter or can we talk, Karen asked, her voice gentle but urgent. "Please, there's a bench over there, away from the entrance. I need to tell you something." I should have said no, should have walked away. But something in her eyes, something desperate and sad and deeply ashamed made me nod. We sat on a wooden bench under a magnolia tree, its white flowers just beginning to bloom. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She twisted her hands in her lap, and I noticed they were shaking. "I heard about what happened," she finally said. "Dr. Harris mentioned it during rounds, not the details, patient confidentiality and all, but enough. He said a young man named Ethan Bennett had been admitted Thursday night after a severe episode, that his mother had made the difficult decision to authorize emergency admission." She turned to look at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. And I knew my daughter was involved somehow, because she'd been talking about Ethan for months now, about how difficult he was, how unstable, how his mother was controlling and overbearing and trying to keep him dependent on medication he didn't need. Each word was a punch to my gut. "I believed her at first," Karen continued, her voice breaking. "I'm ashamed to say I believed her. Because Melissa has always been ... persuasive. She knows how to shape a story, how to make herself the victim, how to make everyone else the villain. Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Karen reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers, she pulled up a series of text messages and handed the phone to me. Because 3 days ago, I found these on the family computer. Melissa had been using my email account to correspond with someone named Derek. She thought I didn't know the password, but I'm her mother. I know everything. I looked at the screen, and what I read made my blood run cold. Melissa, he's completely off the rails now. Thursday, I'm going to push him to confront his mother. If it goes how I think it will, she'll finally give up on him or he'll end up arrested. Either way, I win. Derek. And then, Melissa. Then I file for divorce, claim I was a victim of his abuse, get the house, and whatever's left in his accounts. His disability payments too. Once the state declares him incompetent, his mother will be too guilty to fight it. Derek, you're a genius, babe. Melissa, I know. And once this is over, we can finally be together without hiding. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. She planned it, all of it. The confrontation at my house. She wanted him to hurt me. She wanted me to give up on him. Or to do exactly what you did, Karen said softly. Have him committed. Because either way, she gets what she wants. Control of his assets and freedom to be with this Derek person. I felt like I was going to be sick. You're her mother. Why are you showing me this? Karen's face crumpled. Because I raised a monster. And I didn't see it until it was too late. Because my daughter has been systematically destroying a young man's life for money and her own twisted games. Because you need to know that what happened wasn't your fault or Ethan's fault. It was her. She took the phone back, wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. I've already contacted Dr. Harris with this information. It's going to be part of Ethan's case file. Evidence of medical abuse and manipulation. It might help with his treatment, understanding the external factors that contributed to his decline. Does she know? I asked. Does Melissa know you found these? Not yet, but she will soon. I'm meeting with a lawyer Monday morning to discuss what legal action can be taken. What she did deliberately, keeping him off his medication, manipulating him into violent episodes, it's criminal. At the very least, it's grounds for a restraining order. I sat there trying to process everything. All this time, I'd thought I was the failure. That I hadn't loved Ethan enough, hadn't been strong enough, hadn't found the right words to reach him. But it had never been about me. It had been about a woman who saw my vulnerable son as a tool, a resource to be exploited and discarded. I'm so sorry, Karen whispered. I'm so sorry my daughter did this to your boy. To you. If I had known sooner, you couldn't have known, I said, though the words felt hollow. Part of me wanted to rage at her, to blame her for raising someone capable of such cruelty. But looking at her tear-stained face, her shaking hands, her obvious anguish, I saw another mother. Another woman destroyed by circumstances beyond her control. Will you, ... double quotes, Karen hesitated. Will you tell Ethan? When he's ready to hear it? If he'll listen to me. I said, if he doesn't hate me too much to listen, he won't hate you forever, Karen said, placing her hand over mine. Dr. Harris says once his medication stabilizes, once the fog clears, he'll be able to think rationally again. He'll understand that you saved him. I hope you're right. We sat there for a few more minutes. Two mothers bound by the cruelty of a daughter and the love of a son. Finally, Karen stood, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. I need to get to my shift. But Helen, thank you. For what? For loving your son enough to make the hardest call a mother can make. For not giving up on him even when it would have been easier. My daughter was counting on you being weak. She didn't count on you being strong. After she left, I sat alone on that bench for another hour, watching the magnolia petals drift down in the spring breeze. I thought about Melissa's texts, about her calculated cruelty, about how close she'd come to winning. But she hadn't won, because I'd made that call. Because Dr. Harris had sent that crisis team. Because Ethan was inside that building right now, getting the help he desperately needed, whether he knew it yet or not. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Dr. Harris. Melissa's mother showed me the messages. Please keep her away from Ethan. Please don't let her finish what she started. The response came quickly, already done. She's been barred from visitation. Focus on healing, Helen, for both of you. I looked up at the psychiatric wing, at the windows with their security screens, and wondered which room held my son. I wondered if he was thinking of me, if he was cursing my name or crying for me or too medicated to feel anything at all. I love you, baby, I whispered to the wind. And someday I pray you'll understand why I had to do this. Then I stood up, walked back to my car, and drove home to wait. Wait for the call that he was ready to see me. Wait for the moment when I could look him in the eyes and tell him the truth about everything. Wait for the possibility of forgiveness. And if forgiveness never came, then I'd learn to live with that too, because his life mattered more than his love. And that was a truth I'd carry for the rest of my days. The 72-hour hold became a week. The week became a month. The month became 8 months of intensive treatment at St. Mary's Psychiatric Facility. 8 months of silence that felt like 8 years. Dr. Harris kept me updated with clinical reports delivered in careful, measured language. Ethan is responding well to the medication adjustments. We've identified some underlying trauma that requires additional therapy. He's not ready for visitors yet, but he's making progress. Not ready for visitors. Those words appeared in almost every update, and each time they felt like a door slamming in my face. I wrote him letters, dozens of them. I poured my heart onto page after page, explaining everything Melis's manipulation. The text messages, Karen's confession, why I'd made that terrible, necessary call. I sealed each letter with tears and prayers and sent them through Dr. Harris, who promised they were being held for Ethan until he was emotionally ready to read them. I didn't know if that day would ever come. The divorce papers were served to Ethan in his 3rd month at St. Mary's. Melissa had filed citing irreconcilable differences and concerns for personal safety. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. Dr. Harris told me Ethan had signed them without reading them. His hand steady, his face blank. He's still processing a lot of anger, Dr. Harris explained during one of our monthly phone calls. Not just at Melissa, but at himself, at his disorder, at the world. And yes, Helen, at you too. But anger is part of grief, and he's grieving the life he thought he had. Does he hate me? I'd asked, my voice small. A pause. He's confused. The medication is helping him see clearly for the first time in almost 2 years, and with that clarity comes the realization of how much he lost, how badly he was manipulated. It's a lot to process. He oscillates between anger that you had him committed and gratitude that you stopped him before he did something unforgivable. Can I see him, please? Not yet, but soon. I promise. Soon became another month. And another. I stopped asking. I just sent my letters and waited. Life went on in that strange, suspended way it does when you're holding your breath waiting for something that might never come. I repaired my house, replaced the broken mirror and the shattered dishes. But I kept Ethan's room exactly as it was, a shrine to hope that one day he'd come home. Mr. Coleman checked on me regularly, bringing banana bread and conversation and the quiet comfort of someone who understood loss. His Martha had been gone 3 years now, and he said the grief never really left. You just learned to carry it differently. Like stones in your pocket, he'd said. At first they weigh you down so much you can barely walk. But eventually, you get stronger, and the stones feel lighter, even though they haven't changed at all. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that one day the weight of losing Ethan, though he was alive, he felt lost to me, would feel lighter. Then, on a cold October morning, nearly 2 years after that terrible Thursday, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen making coffee, watching the autumn leaves fall in my backyard, when I saw the hospital number on my screen. My heart stopped. In 2 years, Dr. Harris had never called, only texted. A phone call meant something had changed. My hand shook as I answered. Hello, Mrs. Bennett. This is Dr. Harris. His voice sounded different, lighter, somehow. Almost happy? Is everything okay? Is Ethan? Ethan is fine? Better than fine, actually. Helen? He's ready. Ready for what? Ready to see you? The coffee cup slipped from my other hand, shattering on the floor, the same floor where everything had shattered 2 years ago. But this time, I barely noticed. He wants to see me. My voice cracked. Are you sure? He asked for you this morning. Said he's been reading your letters. All of them. And he's ready to talk. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Tears were already streaming down my face. Helen, are you there? When I managed to choke out, when can I come? Today, if you're available. Visiting hours start at 2 o'clock. I'll meet you in the lobby and escort you to his room myself. I looked at the clock. It was 9:30. 4.5 hours. An eternity and an instant all at once. I'll be there, I said. Thank you. Thank you so much. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by broken coffee cup pieces and cried. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep in my soul. From the place where I'd stored 2 years of grief and guilt and desperate, fragile hope. Then I cleaned up the coffee, took a shower, and tried on 6 different outfits before settling on a simple blue sweater and jeans. I wanted to look like his mother. Not too formal, not trying too hard. Just ... me. The drive to St. Mary's felt both too long and too short. My mind raced with everything I wanted to say. Every apology and explanation and declaration of love. But I also feared what I might see in his eyes. Anger, resentment, worse indifference. Dr. Harris met me in the lobby at exactly 2 o'clock. He looked older than I remembered. More gray at his temples. But his smile was genuine and warm. He's nervous, Dr. Harris said as we walked through the secured doors into the psychiatric wing, but he's ready. Helen, I want you to know the young man you're about to see is different from the one who came here 2 years ago. The medication is balanced. He's been through intensive therapy. He understands his disorder now, understands what happened, but he's fragile. Be gentle with each other. We stopped in front of a door marked 217. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Dr. Harris knocked softly, then opened the door. Ethan, your mother's here. And there he was. My son, my baby. Thinner than before, his hair shorter, streaks of early gray I didn't remember. But his eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been in years. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, and when he saw me, he stood up slowly. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across that small hospital room. Then his face crumpled. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking on the word. And I ran to him. I ran across that room and wrapped my arms around my son, and he held me back, his body shaking with sobs that matched my own. "I'm sorry," he said into my shoulder. "Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For hitting you. For the things I said. For believing her instead of you. For being so sick and not seeing it. No, baby, no." I held him tighter. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were sick. You were being manipulated. None of it was your fault. But I hurt you. I saw the photos in the police report. I saw what I did to your house, to your face." He pulled back to look at me, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I could have killed you, Mom, and I wouldn't have even known what I was doing. But you didn't. And you're here now. You're getting better. That's all that matters." We sank down onto his bed together, holding hands like I used to do when he was small and frightened. Dr. Harris had quietly left, giving us privacy. "I read your letters," Ethan said after a while. "All 147 of them? The nurses gave them to me last month. Said I was ready. It took me 2 weeks to get through them all. Some days I could only read one before I had to stop because I was crying too hard. You didn't have to read them." "Yes, I did. I needed to understand. And Mom, ... he squeezed my hand. "You saved my life. The call you made, having me brought here, I hated you for it. For months, I hated you so much. But Dr. Harris made me see that if you hadn't done it, I'd be dead or in prison right now. Melissa was driving me toward one of those two endings, and you stopped it. Your mother-in-law, Melissa's mother, she helped too. She gave me the text messages. She made sure everyone knew what Melissa had done. I know Karen visits me sometimes. She apologizes for her daughter, but I tell her it's not her fault. You can't control who your kids become, right?" He smiled sadly. "I mean, look at us. You did everything right. And I still ended up here. You ended up here because someone weaponized your illness against you. And because I loved you enough to make the hardest call of my life." I touched his face gently. "You're not a failure, Ethan. You're a survivor." We talked for 3 hours that day. About everything. About Melissa and the divorce. About his treatment and his progress. About the guilt he carried and the forgiveness he was learning to give himself. About his plans for the future group homes. Continued therapy, maybe eventually a job, and independent living again. "I'll never be normal," he said quietly. "I'll always have this disorder. I'll always need medication. There will always be a risk. Normal is overrated," I told him. "You'll be you. And that's enough." When visiting hours ended, we hugged again at the door. This time, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a beginning. "Will you come back?" he asked, suddenly looking young and uncertain. "Every single week, I promised. As long as you want me to, I'll always want you to. Mom, even when I was angry, even when I couldn't admit it, I always wanted you." Driving home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in 2 years. The stones in my pockets, Mr. Coleman's metaphor, hadn't disappeared, but they'd shifted somehow, made room for something else. Something that felt a lot like hope. 2 years after Ethan's release from St. Mary's, I'm standing in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, and the coffee isn't burning my tongue with bitterness anymore. It tastes like coffee should taste: warm, comforting, ordinary. Ordinary. What a beautiful word that's become. Ethan lives in Shreveport now, about an hour and a half north of Baton Rouge. He chose the distance deliberately, he told me. Not to get away from me, but to build something of his own. Something that wasn't haunted by the ghost of who he used to be. He shares a small apartment with a roommate named Marcus, another man managing mental health challenges. They met in a support group and bonded over their shared love of terrible action, movies, and their shared understanding of what it means to fight your own brain every single day. Ethan works at a nonprofit called Second Chances, a community center that provides support services for people with mental health disorders and addictions. He's not a counselor, he doesn't have the credentials for that, but he's a peer support specialist. Someone who's been through the darkness and came out the other side. Someone who can look another struggling person in the eye and say, "I understand. And you're not alone." He calls me every Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. It's our ritual, as sacred as any religious observance. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Sometimes he's doing great, his voice light and full of stories about the people he's helped. Sometimes he's struggling, the weight of his disorder pressing down, and I just listen while he works through it. Last Thursday's call was one of the good ones. "Mom, you won't believe what happened today," he'd said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Tell me." "There's this kid who comes to the center, Tyler. He's 19. Just diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder. His parents don't understand. They think he just needs to control himself better." Sound familiar? My heart had squeezed. Very familiar. Well, Tyler had an episode in the common room today, threw a chair, scared everyone, then broke down crying because he was so ashamed. And you know what I did? "What did you do, baby?" I sat down next to him on the floor while he was still crying, and I told him my story, all of it. The diagnosis at 7, the struggles, the medication, the woman who manipulated me, the night I hit my own mother. His voice caught slightly on those last words, even after all this time. And then I told him about the call you made, about how the person who loved me most in the world chose my life over my anger, about how that call saved me. I'd been crying by then, silent tears running down my face. What did he say? He asked if you and I were okay now, if I had forgiven you. And Mom, I told him the truth, that there was nothing to forgive, that you were never the villain in my story. You were always the hero. I just couldn't see it through the fog. We'd talked for another 40 minutes, and when we hung up, I'd sat in my kitchen feeling the kind of peace that only comes from knowing your child is not just surviving, but finding purpose in their pain. This morning, I'm expecting him for lunch. He drives down once a month now, usually on Sundays, and we spend the afternoon together. Sometimes we cook, sometimes we watch movies, sometimes we just sit in the backyard and talk about nothing and everything. Mr. Coleman usually joins us. At 77 now, he's become like family. The grandfather Ethan never had, the friend I desperately needed during those dark years. He still brings banana bread, though now Ethan jokes that he's going to have to start bringing bigger pants if Mr. Coleman doesn't stop. At noon exactly, I hear the car pull into my driveway. My heart still does that little leap. It's done since Ethan was born. Part joy, part anxiety, part overwhelming love that has no name. I open the door before he can knock. He's standing there with a bouquet of yellow roses, my favorite tan, that smile that lights up his whole face. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, baby." We hug, and it's effortless now. No tension, no fear, just a mother and her son who fought their way through hell and somehow found each other on the other side. He looks good, healthy. He's put on some weight, the good kind, not the bloated kind that comes from bad medication. His eyes are clear and bright. He's wearing a Second Chances t-shirt and jeans. And there's a calmness about him that used to be so rare I'd photograph it mentally, trying to memorize it before it disappeared. Now it's just who he is. We settle into the kitchen, and he helps me make lunch, grilled chicken salads and fresh lemonade. We move around each other icily, passing ingredients, chatting about his week and mine. It's so beautifully, wonderfully normal that I have to pause sometimes just to absorb it. Over lunch, he tells me more about Tyler, about how the kids' parents came to the center yesterday. They wanted to understand, Ethan says, spearing a cherry tomato. Really understand, not just go through the motions. So I sat with them for 2 hours and explained everything, the neurology, the triggers, the medication, the therapy. And Mom, the father, started crying. Said he'd been so angry at his son, thought he was just violent and disrespectful, didn't realize it was a disorder. That must have been hard for you, I say gently. Seeing parents who didn't understand, actually it was healing, Ethan says. Because I got to be for Tyler what I wished someone had been for you back when I was 7, and the doctors were calling it strong temperament. I got to tell his parents, this isn't your fault. This isn't his fault. But it is your responsibility to help him even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He reaches across the table and takes my hand. And then I told them about you, about the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. My throat tightens. Ethan, ... double quotes, no. I need to say this. I need to say it as many times as it takes for you to really hear it. His green eyes so much like his father's lock onto mine. You saved my life, Mom, not just by making that call, but by never giving up. By writing those letters even when I wouldn't read them. By showing up every week even when I could barely look at you. By loving me when I was completely unlovable. You're always lovable, I whisper. I was always your son. He corrects. But lovable. Mom, I destroyed your house. I hit you. I said things that double quotes. He stops, swallows hard. I said things that still wake me up at night sometimes. That wasn't you. That was the disorder. That was Melissa's manipulation. It was my hands. Though, my voice, and I have to own that. Have to carry it, even while knowing it wasn't entirely in my control. He squeezes my hand. But here's what I've learned in therapy. What I try to teach the people who come to second chances. We can't change what happened. We can only choose what we do with it. And Mom, what you did with your pain was turn it into love, into action, into the courage to save me even when it meant I might hate you forever. I would do it again. I tell him. Every single time I would make that call. I know. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I get to help Tyler and people like him. That's why I'm not in prison or dead or completely lost to that darkness. His voice drops to almost a whisper. Every person I help, Mom, every single one, it's like I'm paying back the debt I owe you. Not that you'd ever collect it, but I need to pay it anyway. For myself, we're both crying now. The good kind of tears. The healing kind. After lunch, Mr. Coleman comes over with his banana bread and joins us on the back porch. We sit in the warm Louisiana afternoon, drinking sweet tea and watching the birds at my feeder. The conversation flows, Italy local gossip, Ethan's stories from work, Mr. Coleman's latest gardening triumph. At one point, Mr. Coleman asks about Melissa, and I see Ethan's jaw tighten slightly, the only visible sign of the wound that probably hasn't fully healed and maybe never will. Haven't heard from her in over a year, Ethan says. Last I knew, she was living somewhere in Texas with that Derek guy. Karen, her mom, sends me a card every Christmas, still apologizing for her daughter's sins. That's not her burden to carry, I say. I tell her that every time. Ethan smiles sadly. But I get it. If I ever have kids, which, given my disorder, I don't know if I should, but if I did, and they hurt someone the way Melissa hurt me, hurt you, I'd carry that too. You'd make a wonderful father, Mr. Coleman says firmly. Because you know what demons look like, and you know how to fight them. That's more than most parents have. As the afternoon fades into evening and Ethan prepares to drive back to Shreveport, he pauses at my front door. You know what the weirdest part is? He asks, "What's that?" Sometimes I'm almost grateful for what happened. Not for the pain, not for the destruction, but for what came after, for finding my purpose, for really understanding my disorder instead of just fighting it blindly, for learning what real love looks like, the kind that makes impossible choices because it's the right thing to do. He hugs me tight. Thank you, Mom, for making that call, for being stronger than I was, for loving me enough to save me from myself. After he leaves, I stand in my driveway watching his taillights disappear, and I think about that terrible Thursday night 4 years ago. The slap, the broken cup, the phone number trembling in my hand. The choice that felt like betrayal but was actually salvation. If I could go back and talk to that terrified woman on her kitchen floor, I'd tell her, make the call. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, he'll hate you for a while. Yes, you'll question yourself every single day. But make the call anyway. Because 4 years from now, you'll stand in this same spot watching your son drive away healthy and whole and full of purpose. And you'll understand that the hardest kind of love is also the most powerful kind. I walk back into my house, the one that was destroyed and rebuilt. Just like us, and I see the framed photo on my mantle. It's recent, from last month. Me and Ethan and Mr. Coleman, all smiling, all together, all carrying our stones, but standing strong anyway. And underneath it, in a small frame I added last week, is a quote I found that perfectly captures everything we've been through. Sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is let her child fall so he can learn to fly. I made that call. I let him fall in the hands of professionals who could catch him properly. And now, he's flying. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but flying nonetheless. And that's all any mother can ask for. The end. Sometimes the deepest love looks nothing like what we imagined it would. It doesn't always come wrapped in warm embraces and gentle words. Sometimes it comes through impossible choices made with trembling hands. Through phone calls that feel like betrayal but are actually salvation. Through the courage to be hated so that someone you love can live. Helen's story reminds us that being a parent isn't about being liked or understood in the moment. It's about loving someone enough to do the hardest thing imaginable, even when it breaks your own heart in the process. What would you have done in her place? When faced with the choice between your child's temporary anger and their permanent safety, which would you choose? Could you dial those numbers knowing it might mean losing them forever, but also knowing it might be the only thing that saves them? This story isn't just about mental illness or manipulation or family destruction. It's about the kind of love that doesn't give up, even when giving up would be so much easier. It's about the strength it takes to save someone from themselves, and the faith required to believe that one day they'll understand why you had to let them fall so they could learn to fly. Helen made the call that shattered everything and rebuilt it stronger. She chose her son's life over his love, and in doing so, she gave him the greatest gift a mother can give, a second chance. We all face moments when love demands more from us than we think we can give. The question is, will we be brave enough to answer that call? If this story touched your heart, please follow the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to life. And remember, the bravest kind of love is the kind that saves, even when it costs everything.